There is a reason why many of my colleagues call me the master squatter, and only half of that is because I dress like a homeless person and probably only own like 2.5 shirts. The other half is that I have perfected the squat. While you were working on it, I was born in it, molded by it. And today we will go through a handful of squat work variations that will help you advance your squat to an unprecedented level. So if you're ready, let's check some of them out. Now, as usual, I want to start you out with something very easy to replicate. For this reason, we're going to start in a squat or deep squat resting position. If you have problems getting your foot on the floor flat, be it because you don't have the necessary ankle flexion, strength in your tibialis, or posterior chain flexibility, don't worry about it. You can just stay like this. Because we will be working on knee touchdowns, which basically just means bringing your knees down to the ground and reversing the movement in a controlled manner. Depending on how far along in your squat journey you are, you can either bring your hands behind your head, add a little bit more core engagement, and a little bit more focus on controlling your hip flexors and your leg musculature in the positive movement as well as in the reversal. Or if you need a little bit of help in the beginning, you can work with your hands on the ground and get those knees down. Do a tiny pseudo hip thrust and reverse the movement. This will help us immensely, not only working on ankle flexion and its reversal, but also on building the necessary strength in our tibialis and in our hip flexors to reverse squat movements, as well as working on the tiniest of stretches in our Achilles and calf musculature to be able to once again bring both feet flat on the ground in the resting position. Easy as can be, knees down and reverse. Moving us to our first unilateral movement pattern, external rotation in one hip joint and only one knee touching down. The benefits of unilateral or asymmetrical patterns are myriad, especially because humans as a whole in their day-to-day life don't go through that many symmetrical movement patterns. So working on both legs simultaneously is absolutely fine. But if you really want to advance, you have to be able to take it one side at a time. And this exercise is perfect for that. Once again, a lot of core engagement, a lot of hip flexor, quad, glute, and general leg musculature engagement. And once again, we're gonna add the tiniest of pseudo hip thrust to have a little bit more activation in our posterior chain, especially in our glutes and in our biceps. And while we're still in the knee touchdown cluster, we are gonna bring the knees down with an internal rotation. So now we have symmetrical touchdowns, we have external hip rotation when touching down, and internal hip rotation as well, taking care of most of the mobility we're going to require in our hip joint. Instead of moving outward, we're going to move inward, and you can focus on just bringing your knee down right in front of your toes. Once again, unilateral movement pattern, absurdly effective in learning how to control your leg musculature in conjunction with your torso. Which, by the way, torso, one of my favorite English words. We should be using this a lot more than we actually do. And if you want to add to this the tiniest bit, you can do crossovers just like so, having double internal rotations with one leg having a longer range of motion than the other. Now, having taken care of most of our foundational movement patterns, now we can start having the tiniest bit of fun as we work on our deep squat mobility. Right hand behind your right leg and move forward, lengthening your hip flexors, lengthening your quads and your lower abdominals, getting an insanely effective stretch in our entire anterior chain, even to our chest and shoulders, before we reverse and switch sides. And now you can notice that everything we've done up until now has only been preliminary work to actually be able to advance in our deep squat mobility. Mastering the handful of foundational exercises we did before this one will help you get to the more advanced stuff and giving you the ability to benefit a lot more from these exercises if you had disregarded our first couple of patterns. Bringing me to by far one of the most effective and my favorite deep squat mobility routine or drill, which is the 90-90 switch. Rolling over our toes, getting into ankle extension, lengthening our tibialis, working on hip rotation and strength and control by reversing the movement into our starting position. Now we need a lot of strength in our adductors and in our glute and leg musculature to not only reverse the movement, but get into this seated position without getting injured. Not just that, but we are combining internal with external hip rotation and ankle flexion with ankle extension and a whole lot of knee flexion, which means that we're basically bulletproofing all of our lower body joints, and we can even add some lumbar or complete spinal rotations if we want to. So if you could only choose one of these exercises to work on, I would highly advise it to be the 90-90 switch. Now, before I get you into something more advanced, more remarkable, we want to put all of this together into one complex movement pattern, because the more we increase the complexity of our movement patterns, the more effective we become at not only doing the same patterns, but also advancing in patterns that we haven't even worked on yet. Starting out in a 90-90 sitting position, we're gonna switch back into our deep squat, bring both knees down, reverse, and we're gonna add some nice posterior chain flexibility as well, lengthening our entire posterior chain all the way down to our glutes, pulling into this pike or forward fold position before we sit down into another deep squat and reverse the 90-90 into the other direction. So we're going up into a deep squat, down into the knee touch, up into a pike position, reversing and repeating into the other direction. And this brings us to one of my next favorite exercises, the cossack squat, which not only has an insane focus on asymmetrical movements, but also a lot of stretching going on in our posterior chain and in our adductors. So let's do a rapid fire cossack squat variation session. Starting with the classic cossack, feet parallel and hip joint all the way down to knee height. Once you can get there, now we can move on to the next level. Be sure to keep your foot flat, because that is going to put the focus stretching on our adductors. Once you start turning it up, you're going to switch from the inside of our legs to the back side, meaning our posterior chain, our biceps, and our calves. So adductors, posterior chain, adductors, posterior chain. Next level from here is sitting down all the way, turn up and turn up. And next level is starting out very low, pushing your hips down actively and switching from one side to the other, opening up our hips a lot more around our hip joints. And this is gonna help us with all kinds of hip related flexibility exercises. For instance, the front split, or the pancake fold. And of course, all of these can be done with your hands assisting you, taking most of the strength part off of this movement until you are perfectly comfortable with the pattern itself. And this one is just a bonus on my part, because I really love this exercise. It just starts out with the cossack squat as its foundation, but we're adding entire body mobility, stretching, strengthening, and working on our control with those semi or pseudo back bends. Switching from the cossack all the way back here and doing this into both directions. And this movement pattern basically takes care of your entire body mobility. Consider that when you are in this back bend or pseudo bridge position, you're stretching your entire anterior chain all the way up to your fingertips. Once you switch forward, if you move all the way up, you're taking care of your posterior chain flexibility. And if you go down into the cossack with your foot flat, now you're adding adductor mobility as well, and move backwards. Once again, strengthening and activating our entire posterior chain. So now we have strength and flexibility and control or mind-muscle connection aspects, which together form the foundation of mobility. And for the more advanced movers, there is a second variation where we, instead of moving with our arm extended, we lower down on our forearm, which means that we're gonna have a lot more strength requirements, but also a lot more stretch once we start lengthening our anterior chain and bringing those fingertips down to the ground. Reverse the side, go down and push up, lengthening your anterior chain, flexing your posterior chain, move all the way up, stretching your posterior chain, and repeat. And we have one more exercise for good measure for today as another bonus exercise. Switch from ankle extension into ankle flexion. Flex your hip flexors, bringing your knees up, hands backwards. Flex your posterior chain, lengthening your anterior chain, and then move your knees forward, going into complete ankle flexion and lengthening the lower insertions of our quads around our knees before we move back into ankle extension, sitting down into our starting position. With this being outside of the cossack squat, basically the most complex pattern we have been working on for today, and the one that requires the most strength, the most endurance, the most flexibility, and the most mind-muscle connection to be able to replicate perfectly. Now, if you can't add all of these variations to your routines, at the very least take one or two of them and absolutely perfect them. Go through them as often as you can. Ignore the time limit. Ignore how many repetitions you should be doing. I know it sounds really weird, but trust me on this one. When it comes to mobility work, it is much more about how you feel while going through these exercises, how you feel when combining them, and how much fun you're having, instead of just trying to pull on a muscle hoping it gets better, because that's no fun. And I want you to have fun. I want you to have fun while you're getting stronger, while you're getting healthier, while you're getting more flexible. And I don't want you to dread the time when you have to think about, oh my God, I haven't worked on my mobility yet. What am I gonna do? I freaking hate it. I don't want you to hate it. I need you to love it. And to love it, you need to have fun while you're doing it. But with that said, once again, sadly, that's all the time I've left for you today. However, if you like the video and subscribe. And please, guys, check out other videos on this channel because we literally have new ones every single day. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Captain Cairo, peace out.